I was really bothered with what was being produced in entertainment and food. These people don't care about food. The fact that they didn't care is what drove me so insane. And I was like, this stuff could be so much better. And no one's fixing it. No one is fixing it. And I was like, I'll fix it.
Alright, so I don't know about y'all, but I can't be the only one who's noticed the transformation of popular cooking channels into food-adjacent clout chasers, right? Like, maybe I've just been watching their content too long, but why does it seem that there's a trend of food YouTubers going from humble home cooks to corporate slot machines? I mean, do Joshua Wiseman or Babish even cook anymore? Because if anything, it really seems like they're eating more McDonald's than filming recipes. And if you're like me, then you probably subscribe to these people to watch them pour their passion into food. And yet nowadays, instead of watching a cook try to nail down a dish, you get a cruddy version of Review Bruh chowing down on burgers, critiquing a Taco Bell as if it were a fine dining establishment. I mean, if these channels haven't succumbed to making food adjacent slop, then it should be easy to tell them apart from other food reviewers, right? So let's do a little experiment. I'm gonna censor the faces of multiple thumbnails, and you tell me which ones are food YouTubers and which ones are supposedly YouTube cooks. Have you locked in your answers yet? Well, joke's on you, it doesn't matter which ones are food reviewers because none of these fuckers are cooking anymore. But if you are curious, these are the supposed YouTube cooks. So if any of y'all really prefer their content now to how it was in the past, then please let me know. Because as far as I'm concerned, these creators aren't really YouTube chefs, but just a bunch of Okay, before I begin, I want it to be known that I don't actually think Wiseman's current content is valueless or unentertaining, but I do think it's slop. And I consider it slop because it's lower effort content streamlined to be pumped out to a wider audience as quickly as possible. And as a creator supposedly focused on teaching others cooking and cuisine, the dip in his food quality, especially compared to his earlier works, lacks a substantial amount of value to me. Therefore, I'ma label this content slop. Y'all can call it something else, but for the purposes of this video, I'ma call it slop. Now, you might enjoy his current videos, and that's fine. I'm not gonna judge you for it. We all enjoy some junk every once in a while. But that doesn't save it from being slop. So if you find his newer videos valuable, then I'm happy for you, but I'm still calling it slop. So this isn't meant as an attack on Josh or anyone else I'll mention in this video or me trashing their current fan base, but an analysis of how cooking creators starting from a place of passion evolve into what I consider food adjacent slot machines. Alright, let's get into it. Me personally, I've never been the biggest fan of Wiseman's content and he's always come off as a bit snobbish, but once this dude started unironically referring to himself as Papa, that's pretty much when I checked out. And in hindsight, I probably made the right call because after that, homie started producing slop and rating fast food chicken sandwiches instead of cooking. And I kinda get it, people like fast food and it has a wide appeal to audiences of all demographics. But cooking isn't really that inaccessible either, unless the $10 ice cream recipe you advertised conveniently left out how viewers would also need a $600 stand mixer / ice machine setup. But like, isn't one video on Mickey D's enough? I mean, what the fuck is all this? I like the videos where he would replicate fast food recipes and show viewers how to improve on takeout from home, but homie's just straight up eating Wendy's now. Josh, put the Popeyes chicken sandwich down. I know you don't want to eat that shit.
This is probably one of the worst chicken sandwiches I've ever eaten in my fucking life. Thanks, Popeyes.
But jokes aside, I'm not gonna keep ragging on this dude, so let's dive into Josh's lore and analyze why Wiseman went from a passionate home cook to a second-rate Mickey D's mukbanger. Now, the story of Joshua Wiseman actually starts before his YouTube days, because prior to Wiseman cooking online, he started engaging with social media at a pretty young age. Notably, he began his online presence through a blog called Slim Palate, where he would publicize his journey of weight loss through the use of a paleo-inspired approach to cooking. And not only would this early success influence his passion for cooking for an online audience, but it would eventually lead to Wiseman publishing his first cookbook at the age of 18. Which is wild, because I'm pretty sure when I was 18, I was just watching anime and getting into online arguments, but that's irrelevant, so let's fast forward a bit. After finishing high school, Wiseman decided to pursue fine dining and would move out to Texas in hopes of pursuing a career in cooking. And through job after job, he would eventually make his way to prominence, becoming the lead chef at the restaurant Uchiko before creating his first video in 2014 at the age of 22. Wait, this dude is 29. How is he 22 11 years ago? This makes no fucking sense! Okay. Basically, I did a bit of digging, and while this dude does claim that he started making YouTube videos at 22, he actually made his first video promoting his cookbook at 18, and then posted a few recipes after that too. So technically, he didn't start making YouTube videos after his experience in fine dining, but he did start uploading more consistently post having accumulated knowledge as a 22-year-old cook, so I'll give it to him. But nitpicking aside, while the niche of cooking on YouTube is pretty prominent today, it was a lot less established back when Josh first started. And as Wiseman says himself,
I was really bothered with what was being produced in entertainment and food. These people don't care about food. It's just the fact that they didn't care is what drove me so insane. And I was like, this stuff could be so much better. No one is fixing it. And I was like, I'll fix it. I could fix this shit. And so I started making YouTube videos.
So, holding true to his intentions, he would later revolutionize the YouTube cooking game with the use of a fast-paced, quick-cut editing style, focusing not only on just upping the quality of food, but also on cinematography and production. Which might not seem too impressive today, but you have to keep in mind what cooking videos on YouTube used to be 8 years ago, which were pretty much spread between the likes of Lauren the Kitchen and Kenji Lopez Alt, cooking in the style of TV chefs like Yan Can Cook, and creators like the Woofy Pit who pretty much record a still shot of their countertops. And as Wiseman acknowledges, while it was pretty new at the time, the techniques in his production have pretty much become the modern standard, saying,
I like to call all these like different TikTokers and short form people my children because they're all copying. They may not be copying me directly, but they're copying someone else who copied me. It ultimately leads to me. Because the whole quick cut editing style stuff started with that.
So while Wiseman's editing and camera work weren't too unique compared to other genres at the time, in regards to YouTube cooks, he contributed significantly to modernizing the game and raising the level of production to what's standard in cooking videos today. Which was super significant to expanding the audience for cooking videos, as even the smallest creators now understand that audiences tend to eat with their eyes first. And Wiseman knows this too, saying,
I eat with my eyes before I eat. So I see that and I'm like, that's great.
So to grow the genre, creators began focusing on not just their recipes, but also in capturing the aesthetic appeal of their foods. As even if a dish could have been the most delicious thing you've ever consumed, you probably wouldn't give it a try if it looked like crap. Therefore, in the realm of YouTube, where you can't even taste or smell any of the dishes being made, let alone tangibly interact with them, the food better look good on camera, because if your eyes ain't feasting, you're likely not watching that shit. So as much as we can criticize Wiseman for his content today, you have to admit that he's pretty goated. And his earlier videos definitely had a special vibe to them. But though I'm not gonna start calling this dude my daddy, I will admit that some of the techniques I use in my videos were probably devised from Wiseman's innovations, despite me having no knowledge of intentionally using any of the edits I've seen in his videos. Again, I was not the most avid watcher of this homie, but I probably was an avid watcher of creators who did watch Wiseman religiously, so by incorporating cool production tricks I've seen from other cooking channels who've been inspired by him, I've probably absorbed some of Wiseman's artistry through online osmosis. So props to Joshua Wiseman, I guess. I don't know, if you're watching, I'll link your channel in the description to credit you or something. Also, shout out to Adam Ragusia. I don't know if anything in his videos were influenced by Wiseman, but his video on how he shoots foods pretty much laid the groundwork for my jump in production from my first to second video. Regardless, by upping the quality of cooking recipes and increasing the entertainment and production value of his content, Wiseman transitioned into what I'd call his golden age of cooking, where he wouldn't just be known for viral signifiers like his cupboard intro or his post-recipe b-roll, but also for his acclaimed video series like the But Better, But Cheaper, and But Faster recipes. But that's enough praise. As much respect as the dude deserves, we're not here to glaze the homie, we're here to deconstruct why his content turned into slop. So let's break down what happened post-Golden Age. Basically, after the Golden Age, it all went to fucking shit. Griffith got crippled and sold his soul to become a demon overlord. The Band of the Hawk got sacrificed and brutally slaughtered. Guts and Costco were subjected to permanent physical and mental scars, and literally everyone reading Berserk got traumatized. But in regards to Joshua's post-Golden Age, dude's content morphed into slop. And you can even see this transition towards the end of his popular series, starting with the cupboard intro we all know and love Wiseman for in his earlier But Cheaper series, to the heavily edited sporadic intro seen in his later But Faster series. And Josh, if you're watching, look dude, I know I have trouble keeping attention at times, but even this is too much for me. Like, what even is this? A transition every 2 seconds? How am I supposed to absorb any of the information about cooking? But maybe that's the point. Somewhere along the lines of Wiseman taking more sponsorships, going from a home kitchen to a production studio, hiring and paying employees to film and edit his videos, focusing more on trendy topics and inaccessible ingredients, and even going to where he barely cooks, Wiseman made the pivot from creating recipes to eating McDonald's. And in this transition is where we can see how he eventually became a slot machine. Because rather than focusing on cooking as he did prior, he now relies on entertainment, making himself the center of attention through personalization. Also, it turns out that Josh has launched a second channel focused solely on cooking while I've been making this video, but that still proves my point. His main channel is still his flagship, and he used to cook there, so if he's making a smaller channel to cook somewhere else, then it just shows how committed he is to primarily producing slop. So in comparison to his earlier videos where his content emphasized both food preparation and his personality, latest videos focus more explicitly on Josh as a person and his interactions with food. And Wiseman will openly acknowledge this, saying that
people know me pretty well and me and food already. I think that honestly a lot of my videos do well just because it's me.
Which is why if you watch his recent videos, they're more about him traveling around to eat different cuisines rather than his preparations for it. But when exactly did this switch happen? Was it when he went from a home kitchen to a professional studio? After he hired a film and editing crew? It surely happened after he started taking a bunch of sponsors, right? Or maybe it's a combination of these factors working in tandem. To understand precisely, we'll need to examine more than a single case scenario. So let's talk about binging with Babish. The story of Andrew Ray, more commonly known by his moniker Babish, was also of a humble home cook who decided to post some of his content to YouTube. But unlike the usual YouTube cooks who would traditionally present their audience a recipe, Babish expanded the niche by introducing a form of content where cooks would recreate popular dishes we often see on TV. And beyond his earliest works documenting some random stuff, his channel pretty much hit right off the bat after his first Binging with Babish video, making a turkey burger from Parks and Rec. And the reason his channel was such a success from the jump was due to a variety of factors like a high production value, good cooking skills, and playing off popular shows. And even watching his first episode of Binging with Babish 9 years later, you can really see something special in his content, and the comments definitely agree. Cause similar to Wiseman, Babish entered the stage when the production of YouTube videos were of a lower quality. And having worked as a freelance documentary filmmaker and editor, Babish was more than equipped in bringing the cinematic appeal of the TV foods he was cooking to YouTube. And by upping the production, cracking a few jokes, and playing off the interest of notable shows, he attracted not only people interested in cooking content, but expanded to a new audience of cinema fans who hadn't yet realized that they would also enjoy watching cooking videos on YouTube. Honestly, it's pretty ingenious considering that many of us grew up watching shows featuring iconic dishes like the Krabby Patty. And knowing the amount of people who will have loved the chance to try some of these dishes we saw on TV, Babish brought a new wave of entertainment and creativity into YouTube by not just preparing a recipe, but through recreating dishes that many people already had an emotional attachment to. And if you don't have the time or ability to recreate TV foods yourself and can't reach into the screen to grab a piece, then your next best option is in watching someone else recreate it to confirm whether any of the cartoon concoctions were actually good. And in shaking up the genre, his popularity exploded. But even though he doesn't really cook as much today, his influence can still be seen in other creators who attempt to recreate the dishes of popular cooking videos, such as David Seymour and Future Canoe. Shout out to David Seymour, by the way. He hasn't posted in a while, so hopefully the dude's okay, but for some reason, his viewership tanked after the homie took a bit of a break from YouTube, and that's some fuck shit, so hopefully the guy's content can start getting the recognition it deserves again. By the way, I think it's kind of funny how the creators who were influenced to do food recreations went from recreating dishes seen on TV to trying to cook some of the recipes made by food tubers we're discussing today, which is pretty demonstrative of how popular cooks like Babish and Wiseman got. Also, it does not escape me that this is a cooking video essay where I talk about cooks cooking in cooking videos and whether they're still cooking. Cooking videoception type shit. But regardless, once Babish started hitting his groove, he slowly incorporated more of his personality and self into his videos and expanded his content to tackle bigger projects, going from a simple turkey sandwich to recreating entire feasts. And beyond tackling larger dishes, his cooking got more demanding too, with Babish often incorporating his own version of the dish at the latter half of the video, especially for dishes that often didn't yield tasty results. Furthermore, after establishing a trend of recreating dishes from pop fiction, Babish would expand further, creating a new series titled Basics with Babish where he would teach foundational techniques prominent to commercial cooking, leading more into traditional food videos produced by most YouTubers at the time, allowing him to access both a conventional and broader audience for his cooking content. And with his added efforts, his popularity exploded, bringing him fame and a bunch of sponsors. However, while attracting sponsors and a larger audience is one of the primary goals of any YouTuber, it did come with an increase in demand, raising the pressure Babish felt to produce better and better content for his fans. Thus, to meet the demands at a reasonable pace, similar to Wiseman, Babish made the decision to streamline his craft, moving from a home kitchen to a more elaborate production studio during the COVID lockdowns of 2020, allowing him to produce high-quality content at an alarming rate of 2 videos a week. Unfortunately, while this decision to upscale his channel yielded his most successful period on the platform commercially, the amount of effort he poured into his videos would soon take their toll, and finding himself overworked to the extent that there were days he was unable to sleep, Babish made the decision to prioritize his health, retreating from his channel and enlisting the help of a film crew and other cooking creators like Solo from the Fallout of Bon Appetit and Alvin from BuzzFeed. And in incorporating the efforts of other cooks, the channel rebranded itself from Binging with Babish to the Babish Culinary Universe, allowing Babish to rest and recover while his film crew momentarily took over the production of his content. And here is where I think we can observe his shift towards corporatization and the eventual production of slop. Now, I think it's obvious why letting others control your channel could lead to the production of different content, but I don't think the production crew is what led to Sloppy. I definitely preferred Babish's work to the crew's, but they made some good cooking content. In my opinion, it was the secondary effect of employing a film crew causing the depersonalization of his content that led Babish to eventually becoming a slot machine. You see, unlike Josh who later over-personalized his content, making himself the focus of his channel rather than his cooking, Babish went to the other extreme and segregated his being from his work. Obviously, this made itself very apparent when he literally removed himself from his channel to take a break, but even before then, you could see the difference in personalization between him and Josh. Whereas Josh's early content focused on his personality as much as his cooking, Babish's videos recreating popular dishes put the focus of his channel on the quality of his creations, meaning that his personality was never central to the content in the first place, but it definitely helped the appeal of his channel and he was able to blend more of his being into the content as he progressed. However, when he decided to step back and basically let others take his place, literally having Alvin take over his popular food recreation series, it basically advertised to his viewers that every aspect of his presence was replaceable, which is what in my opinion led to the start of the Slopification. Because when Babish returned, pretty much every aspect of his channel had been occupied by another creator. And taking those positions back not only would imply disrupting the newly set rhythm, but removing creators financially reliant on him for their employment. So Babish kept the current setup, and while this process has been sustainable and people like Alvin can still be seen making food recreation videos on Babish's channel, the damage had already been done. During his absence, Babish's audience probably split, and the ones watching his channel for Babish slowly dipped as they realized his retreat, while the viewers watching for the content itself likely stayed as the person behind the camera was irrelevant to them as long as the foods from their favorite shows kept being made. And Babish notes this issue himself, acknowledging that
a lot of people responded to bringing other people on the channel with, I signed up for Babish, not for this person.
So after losing the audience built upon Babish's personality, he no longer mattered upon his return, going from a creator that his audience loved and cherished, to just another member of his food production studio that his audience would tolerate as long as he produced the content that they desired. Of course, he later tried to re-personalize his brand, but since his core content was still being produced by other creators, he tried making personality-based content instead, leading to what we have now, where the homie occasionally cooks, but typically just chows down on food before shoving them into a tier list. And I don't want to shit on this dude, especially knowing that he's been through a lot, which is why I haven't really cracked any jokes in this section. But in the kindest way possible, Babish's food ranking videos are kind of ass. Maybe it's just me, but Babish doesn't really add anything of value to the rankings. Like, even though Josh presents as a fine dining snob, at least he'll review a Big Mac under fine dining criteria, and maybe you can learn something from that elitism. Meanwhile, Babish reviews chips with the blandness of boiled chicken, and it kind of makes me cringe. But he'll probably get better with time, as unlike Wiseman, who's always centered his personality around his content, Babish was more focused on food replication, giving him less experience performing contemporaneously, and less of an edge in regards to developing a parasocial relationship with his fans. Again, you just need to look at Alvin replacing him in the food replication content. He was able to do it pretty seamlessly, and since the cook's face is almost never in front of the camera, the focus is placed primarily on the cooking, making the content central to driving the appeal, which is why in regards to the Babish culinary universe, the person behind the cooking is pretty much irrelevant. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I'm just pointing out the effects of depersonalizing your content. I personally don't put my face on screen because I want my viewers to care more about the message than the messenger, but there's pros and cons to doing this, and I'm aware that choosing this probably limits my growth and ability to foster a parasocial relationship to some extent. In the same facet, Babish has stated this as well.
Is that why you intentionally obscured your face? Because you want people to focus more on the food than the person behind it?
That's exactly why.
But in terms of Babish making character-driven slop, it obviously didn't turn out the best, as despite having more subs than Wiseman, his videos get substantially less views, as Wiseman's core audience have always watched videos around his personality, while Babish's audience post-break probably don't give a fuck who's behind the camera as long as they're getting their food fix. So when analyzing why he became a slot machine, beyond things like his personal health, we can see a similar route as Wiseman, taking a bunch of sponsors, upscaling production, hiring a crew, and later attempting to hyper-personalize their content once having developed a sizable audience. And unlike Josh, I think Babish was able to depersonalize even further, eventually removing himself from the process and being able to have other creators make his videos for him. But while the similarities between these channels definitely show the process of corporatization, it doesn't exactly tell us when the switch to making slop was set in stone. And in my opinion, the key change between these creators is when they shifted away from cooking. Okay, it might sound comically obvious for me to say, oh, these fuckers shifted away from cooking when they stopped cooking, but I'm not referring to cooking as an action, but as a genre. And there's technically 3 shifts, so let me explain. The first shift is going from cooking to food, the second being from creation to consumption, and the final pivot switching from education to entertainment. So let's explain these shifts first before addressing how to eat the slop, as there's a lot of ground to cover, so I'll save the bigger stuff for later. Again, this is gonna sound whack as fuck initially, cause food and cooking food seems pretty similar, but genre-wise, they're completely different. Think of the food genre as your fingers, and think of the cooking genre as your thumb. Your thumb counts as a finger, but not all fingers are thumbs. Likewise, cooking is a broad category encompassing many smaller niches like food reviews, food historians, and mukbangers, with one of those niches being cooking content. So while all cooking videos count as food content, not all food videos should be labeled under cooking. And regarding creation to consumption, it's pretty simple. Are you making it or are you eating it? For example, you watching this video would count as consumption as you're consuming my content, while me saying this sentence falls under creation as I'm creating this video. Similarly, while all YouTube content counts as creation, in regards to filming food content, we can separate these categories into foods being created and dishes being eaten. Chefs that produce recipes or food historians explaining history are creating dishes and knowledge, whereas mukbangers, food reviewer, and whatever the fuck Wiseman and Babish are doing count as consuming things that have already been made. Finally, entertainment and education should be generally understood as whether the purpose of the video is made to entertain or to educate. If the video primarily answers a question, provides information, or teaches you how to accomplish a task, then it's probably educational. While if a video is made to shock or amuse you, or even to distract you, then it falls under entertainment. So a video explaining how to cook a recipe or teaching the history behind a dish is primarily educational, while a video focusing on someone eating a dish or their experience with consuming food is usually entertainment. Now, it should be noted that while these categories can be seen as a spectrum, with a focus on one side usually taking away from the other, they're not mutually exclusive, as videos can both be highly entertaining while substantially educational, such as literally all my videos. Watch all my shit. But that said, YouTubers who optimize for growth tend to lean more heavily into consumption and entertainment, with the biggest food tubers focusing on food rather than cooking. And you can be certain that creators like Josh and Babish know this. I mean, Josh has literally acknowledged that.
So when it comes to food and content, there are really two classes. One, and this is 99%, they just are making content. And their sole goal is views, likes, vanity numbers, vanity metrics. That is it. Now, there's a very small percent that are after something else. And I think that would be education, right? They want to educate, they want to show people, or they do truly love something, you know?
And he's right. All I have to add is that Josh, when you talk about the first type of food tuber just doing it for money and clout, that's you! This homie acts like he isn't making slop since he's still passionate about food, but these things aren't mutually exclusive. You can both be passionate about something while still making slop. For example, there are potters who care a lot about pottery, but while they may care significantly about their craft, some of them still mass produce lower quality pots to sell for a living. And in some cases, people need to do this to fund their passion. The difference between these people and creators like Babish and Wiseman is that these food tubers started out cooking and got hugely successful from it. So it's not like they ever needed to sell out for slop in the first place. They just made slop because they wanted to. And when analyzing Babish and Wiseman, we can see each of these shifts towards corporatization being made. Both creators started with cooking, focusing on demonstrating techniques, crafting dishes, and educating people on cuisine, but nowadays we primarily see them reviewing things with an emphasis of food over cooking, their personalities as entertainers, and their consumptions of different dishes. So while we understand how they've changed, for fans of their older content, the more interesting question is why they made this shift. Beyond reasons like health issues and burnout, the most notable reason is probably ease and profit. And on YouTube, money is earned primarily through ads, watch time, and views, all of which can be optimized by simply putting out more content, and the easiest videos to shit out are slop. Because believe it or not, it's actually a lot harder to make cooking videos than you'd think. You need to plan out a day where you have time to cook, you create a recipe, purchase the ingredients, set up the lighting and camera, film the cooking, reset the lighting and camera for different angles, cook around the camera in front of your face, because you can't really see, but the shot's more important than your vision, and you can't really put the back of your head in front of the fucking camera, because then you would ruin the entire footage, all while paying attention to time and not burning anything, because if you make a mistake, you're literally cooked and just have to reshoot another day. But while cooking is hard, consumption is a lot easier. After all, instead of cooking, you can just record yourself eating a cheeseburger and call it a day. And this goes not just for cooking, but education and creation as a whole. Creating something out of nothing is a lot harder than using something already made. Similarly, trying to teach someone something is a lot harder than trying to entertain them. And if it wasn't, you'd be watching YouTube in school and taking 7-hour classes at home. The point is, it's obvious which niches are more susceptible to producing slop, and I'd argue that the consumption and entertainment side will always have a slippery slope to being slop machines, because the core aspect of creating is intrinsically harder than consuming. And you're participating in a great example of that, because while you can finish consuming this video essay in an hour or something, I had to take over a month to script and produce it. Similarly, it can take hours to cook a painstaking meal, and yet the food can be gobbled down within minutes. So while I'm not saying that there are no food cooks making slop, for example, I'd argue that Alvin can cook, and whatever this fucking deep fried processed block of cheese is also slop, but making that deep fried block of diabetes still takes more work than eating a Popeye's chicken sandwich on camera, which is probably why the tendency to produce slop falls more into the side of consumption and entertainment. And if we look at Wiseman and Babish's content to see whether they're focused more on creation or consumption, surprise, surprise, they're fucking chowing down to McDonald's now. But beyond ease of production, the biggest cause of this shift was probably an external pressure from YouTube itself. And to understand the external drive behind their pivot, we need to understand the algorithm. Now, very generally, the YouTube algorithm is basically this robot that sorts YouTubers into niches, choosing which videos to promote to which audiences based on the genre and overall performance, meaning that a cooking video that performed well would be promoted to an audience interested in cooking. However, since cooking content is a subgenre of food videos, people who like watching food content like mukbangs may not be interested in cooking of food history. So by analyzing user data and comparing the performance of these videos with different audiences, the algorithm is able to sort chefs into the YouTube cooking niche, promoting these creators to the audience it thinks that their content is most aligned with. But if you keep note of how only a subsection of people watching food content are interested in cooking, then if you're a cooking creator wanting your channel to grow as large as possible, you're gonna eventually need to appeal to a bigger audience. Plus, since YouTube is a hyper-capitalist free market hellhole where creators constantly compete for the same audience's attention, your choices are pretty much to grow or get buried. And if your metrics underperform compared to the size of your audience, then YouTube will think your content has gone to shit and start slowly killing your channel. Which is why successful creators take multiple steps to raise the bar of entry, such as increasing production, uploading more frequently, doing snappier edits for audience retention, and hiring a crew to subsidize their workload. But if you notice, while doing all these things will bring you more commercial success, it does kill the creative aspect of your channel, making your videos more adjacent to corporate productions rather than individual projects. And in doing all these things, it might make you the biggest creator in your genre, but you're still functionally limited by the size of your niche. And since YouTube is a space where most people arrive for leisure rather than learning, as seen by the biggest channels being those like Mr. Beast and ones making gaming videos, there's simply a much larger audience for entertainment rather than education. Meaning that in corporatizing every other aspect of their channel for algorithmic performance, creators like Babish and Wiseman, either consciously or not, realized that the only thing holding them back from further growth was their genre. So knowing that there's a larger core audience for entertainment-focused content, we can now understand why these creators don't cook anymore. Because they're not making entertaining food videos with a priority on teaching others to cook, but making food-adjacent content with an emphasis on entertainment. Meaning that these creators make slop not because their food videos went to shit or that they lost passion for cooking, but because they made the explicit decision to pivot from food education to food entertainment in hopes of seeking a bigger audience. Therefore, it's not surprising that the biggest cooking channels also happen to be the least educational and the most reliant on food entertainment and shock value. Because if this video wasn't focused on analyzing the corporatization of YouTube cooks, and instead a video of me cooking a 50-foot giant meatball and then exploding that shit with TNT, it'd probably get like 50 times more views. And you can easily see the shift in focus just by looking at their thumbnails. Babish and Wiseman used to focus their thumbnails around their food, but nowadays, their thumbnails show some AI food garbage bullshit in the background with their big ass faces plastered all over the screen. And the reason the food is AI garbage in the back is because it's literally irrelevant to the video. Okay, hello, this is mid-editing Frog Dude here. I was originally going to leave the video as is because I'm lazy, but I realized that some people don't watch video essays actively, so I decided to explicitly come out and say that after doing a bit more research, it seems that neither Babish nor Wiseman use AI in their thumbnails. Okay, great. The thumbnail pretty much gives you all you need to know because it's advertising how the food is the B-plot while the main focus is on the entertainer, shifting from a focus of cooking and food to themselves as a brand, eventually killing the fundamental aspect of their cooking channels to access a bigger audience, sacrificing their souls for commercial success. And yes, I mean that literally because YouTubers aren't humans, they're fucking cyborgs. Now, hold on, don't click off this video, I'm not insane, I swear to God this shit's gonna make sense. Hear me out. Have y'all ever watched the movie Ghost in the Shell? If you haven't, basically, the movie's about a woman who had her brain placed in a robotic body, questioning how much of her humanity is truly left, which makes her a cyborg as she's a human soul encased in a mechanical body. And with YouTube, all your favorite creators are literally the same. Because while you think you're listening to me right now, you're really listening to a machine replaying my essence to you. And that goes for every other person on this platform, as nothing is tangibly real. The voices you hear aren't from humans, but mechanical sounds mimicking our language. And the people you see aren't actually people, but digital projections meant to give you the illusion of an actual person. In fact, the only thing real about this site where you can broadcast yourself is the essence of your soul imbued into your art. And in contrast to this, brands and corporations don't have souls. Even if the law tries to tell you that they should be treated as individuals with free speech and the right to spread any bullshit without repercussions, conglomerations are simply made up of too many different divergent beings and technological facets to represent a singular human soul. In fact, all the humans within the group actively discarded their individuality for some bigger corporate goal. The point is, brands and corporations on YouTube are basically soulless machines. And with individual creators, they're one step away, as unless you're personally familiar with whoever you're seeing on screen, you're interacting with a literal cyborg. Because if the mechanical housing of YouTube and the internet were to suddenly disconnect, then you would no longer have access to any of my content, meaning you would no longer be able to hear my deepest thoughts, experience any of my passions, or interact with my personhood. In other words, you would no longer have access to my soul. But how I present in real life and how I present online aren't exactly the same. While we may believe that recordings are accurate, especially compared to our memories, the ability to capture my essence in full simply isn't possible. And something about the difference in medium between flesh and steel can't fully grasp the nuance of my conscious or the subtle differences in how I communicate physically. So while YouTube is a medium of communication, it's also a technological one as opposed to a natural medium of flesh and blood, divorcing many human qualities from being conveyed regardless of how we may try to fully capture ourselves on camera. So in understanding that our essence is one of the few things we can truly convey, it's essential to preserve as much of our soul as possible in our works. However, in failing to do that, you get soulless works of slop that are more so products than art, which is why OG fans of Babish or Wiseman might get weird feelings from watching their content, even taking into account the switches in genre. Because the reason we feel such a disconnect from these creators is because they lack the soul we used to love them for. For example, I love watching review bro videos, but when it's Joshua Wiseman eating Wendy's instead, it just doesn't hit right. And something about watching Babish struggle to put a potato chip in his his mouth is like watching a printer shit out a piece of paper. There's simply no passion or soul behind these videos. And if you think back about why corporations don't have souls, everything starts lining up. Babish and Wiseman aren't singular creators anymore. They're brands maintained by corporate sponsorships and a crew of individuals behind the camera. In Wiseman's case, he's got
11 dedicated people.
No.
And then we have a bunch of like freelancers that we use.
while with Babish, he
Started with Kendall, who's my kitchen producer, and now have brought on Brad Cash as our creative director, a couple shooters, a couple editors, a couple producers, I mean.
So if anything, their essence online is closer to corporations than humans. And if we ask ourselves how Slopification occurred, it wasn't a single decision to sell out or make shittier content, but a slow process of hiring others and replacing their humanity with the algorithm. For example, maybe you're like me and you struggle to stop yapping. Well, the algorithm doesn't like that. Audiences have short attention spans, so you better chop that shit up. Of course, you don't want your videos to flop, so you do exactly that, and boom, one part of your personality is gone. Or maybe you like yelling "fuck" and criticizing systemic power structures, but the sponsors and YouTube higher-ups don't want you doing that. So you clean up your act, present as PG as possible, appealing more to 10-year-olds than actual adults, and boom, there goes another chunk of your soul. How many more times can you do this shit, chasing what the robot algorithm wants from you before you're no longer yourself? I don't know where the line is, but I definitely know that these fuckers are corporate slot machines. They did everything the Big Daddy algorithm demanded of them. They focused on trends, made inaccessible foods for shock value, pivoted from education to entertainment, stopped creating for consumption, added ADHD editing, hired a film crew, hired a cooking crew, turned into a brand, started selling commercial products, took sponsorships from alleged scams, streamlined their process to pump out more slop, and literally erased their humanities from their channels. I mean, I did a literal double take when I saw a Babish walk in Walmart.
What the fuck?
So it's hard to say exactly when creators become slot machines, but these are a few common occurrences between all the people who did. And you don't need to see all these aspects present, but if you identify a creator of most of them, then they're probably making slop. Because slop isn't just bad content, it's bad content that is bad because it inherently lacks substance and soul. And that lack of soul is the slow process of replacing your passion and humanity with trendy algorithmic preferences, going from a literal cyborg to a full-on machine. Because as Babish notes,
The algorithm is starting to determine the content rather than the other way around. It's not starting to, it fully is. Thumbnails, runtimes, subject matter, title, all these things are optimized for what do we think the algorithm is going to like the most.
so while the process of corporatization is usually slow, it's already happened to these creators and it's continuing to get worse. For instance, while Babish's content is more depersonalized than Wiseman's, I'd argue that Wiseman's slop is sloppier than Babish's, because he has less of a focus on creation. But give Babish a few more years, and if he keeps going in the same direction, he'll be making the stuff that Wiseman's making today, while Wiseman will be making Mr. Beast adjacent food challenge videos. And this isn't just speculation, both these creators have openly admitted wanting to further corporatize. We just saw Babish saying it, and in Wiseman's case, he says that he wants to
Find more balance by, bringing on a CFO, bringing on a co-CEO, or building a bigger corporate structure to take as much load off of me as possible.
So it's obvious that this trend of corporatization will just continue. But while their content may lack the humanity that made us originally fans of their work, and they continue to lose more and more of it, at least that's just online, right? Surely their lives outside of their careers are just fine. But what if it isn't? What happens when corporatization not only destroys the humanity of your work, but also bleeds into affecting your personal life? Well, for me, there's no sadder example of this than one of my favorite cooking channels.
So let's do it.
Okay, admittedly, I made this video with Guga in mind specifically because I've always been a bigger fan of his channel than the creators I've mentioned earlier, which makes it that much more sad to me that his content devolved into slop. In fact, I've been an avid watcher of his channel since the sous vide butter experiment before he started primarily uploading on his main channel Guga Foods, so I shit you not, I am probably one of the first couple thousand subscribers to Guga Foods and have been with its channel since its literal takeoff. Of course, in full transparency, I have weaned off his videos more and more around 2 years ago, but since that's post-commercialization and I still occasionally watch his stuff, it's not too relevant to my ability in explaining the Guga lore, and I'm more than qualified in conveying the plot. Alright, so with the context out of the way, we can now explore the story of Guga, from his channel's creation, controversy, and eventual corporatization. Gustavo Tosta, known today as Guga, is a popular YouTuber making food videos focused on experimental cooking, usually around steaks. But before his ascension to e-fame, he was born in Brazil before immigrating to America and settling in Miami, Florida. However, during this upbringing, he had a love of food and a past in Taekwondo, which was significant as he would often be treated to Korean barbecue after tournaments.
I was raised by a Korean master. I taught Taekwondo my entire life, and my childhood was either 1, obviously Brazilian food, 2, Korean food, everybody.
And this influence with Korean cuisine would exacerbate his love of food, creating a trend of going to barbecues after tournaments that he passed down to his nephew.
You don't remember on the Saturday after we're coming back from Taekwondo that we always went and got some Korean barbecue?
Right after we finish Taekwondo, I always take Angel to go eat with me in the restaurant, and we always have some type of Korean barbecue.
Eventually, spreading even further as his love of sharing food with others led him to often treating his co-workers at his web design company to eating out at places like Brazilian barbecues. However, knowing the high cost of eating out and his love of cooking and cuisine, he eventually decided it would be more cost-effective and efficient to cook the food himself. Thus, equipped with a sous vide, a simple grilling rack, and a flamethrower, Guga would grill up steaks during his lunch break at work, eventually deciding to record his cooking and uploading his findings to his channel Sous Vide Everything. Now, for those less into cooking, sous vide translates into under vacuum in French and is a technique of submerging foods in a water bath, typically used in restaurants rather than home cooking. But with the invention of portable and compact sous vide systems, it later became accessible to home cooks, especially those on a crunch for time. Exactly the situation Guga was dealing with. So by being into cooking as much as he was, Guga jumped into getting a sous vide early and pretty much revolutionized the use of a sous vide on YouTube, testing many experiments to find the best ways of cooking with it and inspiring many home cooks and YouTube chefs alike. In fact, this fucker inspired me to buy a discounted one on Black Friday, so let me get some use out of this shit and show y'all how it's used. First, you grab a container. Then you fill it with water, stick the sous vide on, set its temperature, vacuum seal whatever you want to cook, and then shove it in the water. You just leave it there for a few hours, and since it'll always stay at the same temperature, you never have to worry about it being overcooked or undercooked and can just eat it whenever it's done. Pretty tedious and niche, but if you have a 7-hour winter class or anything else that'll take you out of the house for a while, you can just chuck something into the sous vide before you leave and have a ready to eat meal as soon as you're back. And I guess others found it appealing too, because after a sous vide butter experiment, Guga's channel blew up. And capitalizing on the success, Guga later branched out into a more conventional food channel focused on other forms of cooking and grilling, and that channel exploded even more than the first one, eventually surpassing it and becoming what we now know today as Guga Foods. And during this time, Guga would become known for his wacky experiments, dry aging projects, and listening to the suggestions of his viewers, often trying the results of these experiments with his cousin Mao Mao, co-worker and friend Ninja, and his nephew Angel. And the natural chemistry between him and his family, combined with the ingenuity of cooking, projected Guga to great success. But obviously, this period of authenticity didn't last forever, because I wouldn't be talking about him if his content didn't turn to slop. And while we could discuss all the things I talked about earlier regarding Babish and Wiseman and go through all the individual aspects of Slopification, I think a more interesting approach would be to analyze how his Slopification spilled into hurting his real-life relationships. And the greatest example of this can be seen in the lost friendship between Guga and Ninja. When reflecting on everything I loved about Guga's channel, I don't think I ever watched his channel for him. I mean, I liked the recipes and food he'd cook, but what I really enjoyed was how authentic the reactions and connections were between his friends and family. Specifically, when I think about how great the channel was, there's an image burned into my mind. And when I close my eyes and imagine sous vide everything, I see Ninja's face and the happiness he experienced eating his first Wagyu steak. Because there was something so raw and real about that experience, something so viscerally human that the essence of his joy shone through the mechanical medium of YouTube. But 3 years down the line, and Ninja's essence had been erased. A couple years after that, and his cousin Mao Mao was gone too, with the only family member being left as his nephew Angel. But even Angel's presence has slowly waned, overshadowed by other employees, namely his friend Leo. So in the same way that Guga made the decision that it'd be more effective to cook from work all those years back, he made the same decision that it'd be more efficient to cut his family from his channel. And if you consider optimizing for the algorithm, we can easily see why. Unlike Guga and his current employees, his family and friends were just guests. His channel was a small hobby when he started taking off, so they never got compensated. They were just paid in friendship and free food. So unlike Guga, who wanted to build a brand, they didn't have a financial incentive to appeal to the algorithm and just present it themselves. As a result, Ninja didn't always agree with Guga, and sometimes he preferred filet mignon to picanha. But obviously, that didn't help Guga, especially when making videos declaring picanha as the queen of all steaks. Preferences are natural, but if you're trying to make a video conveying a specific message, disagreement doesn't help. Similarly, Angel and Mao Mao also had their preferences, but unlike Ninja, they were more than just co-workers, they were family. So Guga was more tolerant of Mao Mao's keto diet and Angel's disdain for vegetables.
I'm a vegetable hater. Nobody is making me eat vegetables.
However, as his channel got bigger and he made more dishes, those dietary restrictions ended up limiting his potential recipes and later became restrictions to his commercial success, which explains why family members either disappeared like Mao Mao or took a backseat like Angel. As employees like Leo, who had no dietary restrictions and was known for being very descriptive of food, presented as a bigger asset to the channel's presentation. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's explore Ninja's erasure and how this led to Guga's Slopification. Basically, noticing Guga's channel taking off, Ninja would take inspiration from his friend, creating Salty Tales, a channel of his own. And while Guga was initially supportive and promoted his friend with shoutouts, when Ninja's channel started gaining traction, he evolved from a friend into competition. And it should be noted that many aspects of Ninja's channel were similar to Guga's, focusing on cooking steaks and having similar editing and presentation. So maybe Guga saw Ninja as riding his coattails, but Ninja still contributed significantly to sous vide everything while simultaneously working on his own channel. And despite the similarities, this never resulted in any controversy, as Guga never explicitly said anything negative about his friend or his channel. However, during COVID, their web design company went remote, which presented Guga the perfect opportunity to show his colors. He could not only cut off any disagreement in his videos, but justify removing Ninja from his channel due to lockdown and distance. And since then, Guga has never invited Ninja back on to sous vide everything, despite clarifying in a comment that they didn't fall out. But while Guga stated that they had been fined publicly, viewers noted that the word ninja had been soft blocked from appearing in the comments, with Ninja himself replying to a few comments on his channel saying that he was never invited back to sous vide everything. And that's when Slopification began. You see, with Babish and Wiseman, since I didn't watch their channels consistently, I wasn't able to determine when these creators became slop. But with Guga, it was painfully clear. I should have realized it then, but when Ninja was removed from his videos, it was Guga making the decision to kill the humanity of his channel. And like Babish and Wiseman, it wasn't a quick process, but it was obvious that something had changed. The man who once made accessible videos started doing wacky experiments focusing more on shock value than cooking. Because even though Guga had always done crazy experiments, those things were originally accessible, like making different fruit mashes to see which best tenderized steaks, or testing different cooking times on chicken. At the end of the day, the food was always edible because he was still making meals for his friends and family. But when he shifted from recipes to content, he started focusing on crazy meat experiments, spice challenges, and luxury ingredients. And he stopped teaching recipes or trying to tenderize meats and focused more on entertainment instead. But if you're curious which tenderizer is the best, the answer is always pineapple. There's a lot of other stuff Guga tries, but it's either less effective or fucks with the flavor of the meat too much. Use pineapple. Regardless, the only person not using pineapple is seemingly Guga. Because rather than doing different experiments with different seasonings or methods to cook meat, he's now injecting Wagyu beef tallow into eye-round steaks and dry aging food in hot sauce for shock value and trend chasing. And a few years after replacing Ninja, Mao Mao suddenly vanished too. Suddenly, Angel's friend Leo was in every video, and it seems that he started getting more and more focused. Now, it's kind of obvious why. As I said earlier, Leo is known for being really descriptive of food, and that helps to venerate Guga's dishes. Meanwhile, Angel's a picky eater and way less performative. But despite being someone who's interested in cooking food, it might sound wild for me to say this, but when Leo describes food in as much details as possible, I don't give a fuck. I don't care how descriptive he is. I much preferred the genuine joy that spread through Ninja's face when he tried delicious meals. After all, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and in this case, that's more true than ever. Ninja's joy was real, while Leo is on a payroll to describe Guga's dishes. So no shit he'd say that the dish tastes great. Do you really think an employee would criticize his boss's dish to his own face when it could hurt Guga's brand and affect his own payroll? No matter how descriptive Leo is, while I can cognitively understand all the things that he's describing, it just doesn't feel real. With Ninja, I could relate to the emotions he'd feel in a way that transcended the mechanical mediums of YouTube. I could feel his actual soul. Something in that moment was truly precious, and I'm glad I was there to experience it, but now that's gone. Guga replaced his channel's authenticity by commercializing for algorithmic success. Unlike Josh and Babish, he didn't just remove his humanity from his channel, he removed the actual humans who kept his video grounded, which makes me question whether he ever put his soul into his videos or if he was just relying on the appeal of his guests. Because as people often say, money and fame doesn't inherently make people susceptible to shitty behaviors, it just amplifies pre-existing traits. In the case of Guga, maybe he's always been a ruthless entrepreneur. After all, even before YouTube, he was able to find commercial success as the CEO and president of his own web design company for over a decade. And in working closely with friends and family, he never needed to make any cold calculating decisions about cutting them off for his company's success. But once YouTube became a more profitable business for him and put him in a situation where he could make the choice to replace them for more commercially effective employees, maybe he leaped at the opportunity. Honestly, I don't even know if I should include this section of the video because part of me is convinced that if Guga ever comes across this and he really is the cold-blooded businessman he might be, homie's gonna sue the fuck out of me. And I'm so convinced that this has a decent chance of happening that I'm not even gonna include this dude's face in the thumbnail, even though I know the video would perform like 30% better if I did. So Guga, if you're watching, remember that I'm an OG fan and please spare me and my channel. So with that said, let me just give a quick disclaimer that everything I've currently said and will later say in this video is completely alleged, speculative, and all Fantasyland fabricated fanfiction that I made up with zero inherent reflections in reality. Okay, great. Now that I'm less susceptible of getting sued, let's carry on. Basically, unlike Babish or Wiseman, Guga provides an example of a creator who more actively pursued corporatizing their content, as opposed to other creators who may have unknowingly ended up making slop by chasing growth. And while Guga never actively stopped cooking, he did stop cooking accessible recipes and focus more on Wagyu and dry aging. Eventually, like Babish and Wiseman, he hired a film and editing crew, turned his channel into a brand, started selling his own products, and even built himself a kitchen and production studio, doing almost all the things listed earlier as symptoms of slopification. And in understanding what actions Guga has taken to deliberately dehumanize his content for a bigger audience, we can see where exactly this slopification occurs. Because it was only after he removed Ninja and then later Mao Mao that his videos got trendier and trendier, and his experiments got less acceptable. He started taking sponsorships from alleged scams and even collaborating with other internet slot machines and publicly known shitheads like Mr. Beast and Uncle Roger. Alleged shitheads, by the way. And my question is, why the fuck did you do this, Guga? You used to trash Solpe for making over-expensive slop, and now you're doing the exact same thing. What the fuck happened to you? I used to look forward to watching all your videos after high school. Now you're turning a fucking slot machine. How could you do this to me?
The algorithm.
Let's do it.
Do you like that last bit? It's pretty entertaining seeing someone start raging out, isn't it? Or maybe it made you feel a bit uncomfortable. If it did, that's a good thing. If it didn't, maybe it's because it resonated with you. Maybe you started getting angry with me, feeling that your rage over these creators turning into slot machines was validated. And if you felt that way, then that's for a reason. You see, throughout this entire video, I've been structured a bit like one of those drama exposed channels. But as I said earlier, my videos are primarily focused on analysis. And to fully understand why these YouTubers traded their humanity for slop, we need to look at the other side of the picture. Not just aspects of corporatization that slop channels go through, but the audience watching that wants them to self-commodify. Because it's easy to get mad at these creators or to start hating on people who turn towards making slop, but we're still missing something important. Guga's just a human being. Babish and Wiseman are too. And there's something weird about demanding that these people be more human when we've been treating them as content the entire time. After all, you don't just drop an entire synopsis on someone's career as if it's lore, and you don't just watch a video of someone doing that and molding over it unless you find that entertaining. But that's the trap of YouTube, a place where not just creators are dehumanized, but where audiences actively contribute to that. And in the same way that you want these creators to be more human, you wanted me to shit on them for no longer making the videos that you like. And to shit on these people and research them as if they were case studies is to pretend that they're not actual humans, but objects for entertainment. So we've been dehumanizing these people as much as they've dehumanized their own content. Because we can say we want their videos to have more soul, but we don't really mean that. Humans burn out, humans get lazy. It's perfectly human for these people to just make content as a job, but yet we want them to perform their souls to us. So the reason why these creators really started making slop is because we wanted them to shed their humanity as much as the algorithm did. After all, the algorithm just generally reflects what audiences want, doesn't it? So when you opened YouTube, you came here to be entertained, and you probably clicked this video thinking you were gonna get some juicy drama and tea, but I actually tricked your ass into watching a critical analysis. Because this video isn't just about YouTube cooks turning into slot machines, this is an analysis of online dehumanization. And I had to fool you into clicking this video because if I didn't, you would have never treated these people as humans. As soon as you opened YouTube, everything on this platform suddenly became content to you. Channels became factories, art became products, and humans turned into literal cyborgs. So that's why these creators became more brands than people, because it's what audiences have always considered them. At the end of the day, we can only speculate why these content creators shed their humanity and trade for commercial success. And despite understanding that YouTubers are akin to cyborgs, we shouldn't forget that these are still real life people with real lives outside of their careers. So even if they've turned themselves into a corporation or brand, they can still internalize hate and criticism. And I know this shit because Babish has literally stated it.
Babish is both a company and a person, and that's a problem because then people can criticize the company, and I'll read it, and it's about me. It's about me as a person, and I don't have much of a stomach for it because I internalize it, and then I feel like I'm fucking up.
So we may not like their transformation from cyborgs to full-on slot machines on the plane of YouTube, but outside of our phones and computer screens, these people are still as human as ever. And unless you're part of the minority fortunate enough to be able to turn your passion into a career, most of us don't really get to live our lives until we clock out of our jobs. So can we really blame these creators for treating their day jobs like it's their day job? I mean, the hobby that they were originally passionate about turned into a career, and in the process, now people are upset at them for treating their jobs for what it is. Because we reduced them to content, demanded that they make videos we like, and they shed their humanities to do it. So why are we so mad? When you humanize these creators and put things in their perspective, it's kind of unfair of us to expect so much of them, to expect them to perform their literal humanities across our screen. I mean, we want these creators to be less corporate, and yet we make demands of how they craft their art, as if there's some AI robot designed to do our bidding. So when we hate these creators who we used to love, are we really hating them for selling their souls for commercial success? Or are we angry because they didn't sell their souls to us? Like, let's really sit with that thought for a second. When you see random slop online, do you usually click it and start shitting on them, or maybe hate watch their content, or do you just scroll down and move on with your life? It's probably the latter. Because just like a shitty Instagram reel, when you see it, your brain takes half a second to label it slop, and then it gets erased from your memory. But when it's a channel you once liked making the slop, you're probably more likely to get frustrated, hate watch the video, or even make a Reddit post shitting on them, right? Both instances are still about slop, so why is there a difference between how you treat one example of slop from another? The answer is that you've probably built some sort of parasocial relationship with the creator you once loved, and you're mad at them for making slop because you feel entitled to a certain type of content from them. Of course, I'm not saying you should tolerate their slop, I'm just saying that hate might not be warranted if their slop is just slop. Obviously, some forms of slop can actively promote harmful ideologies, and for those instances, you should totally lose your shit. For example, you can watch me mauled in 4K during my Unk Raj video, but these cooking creators are just shoving food in their face. Hardly any harm unless you really want to nitpick and critique them for promoting slop, overconsumption, corporatization, clout-chasing materialism, or anything else that they don't even actively espouse. Cause for the most part, cooking content's pretty PG. So for channels like Joshua Wiseman, Babish, or even Guga, I'm not defending their slop, and it's very evident throughout this video that I don't like the directions their channels are going, but it's not like they tried to personally attack me or their audience, so none of their choices warrants any hate or even criticism. As a person who was once a fan, I can feel betrayed and I can be disappointed, but beyond trying to understand why their content turned to slop, I can't justify hating these creators for prioritizing their lives over the joy I get from watching their content, especially when the majority of people on YouTube are demanding exactly what they're putting out. So while as a human, I can never hate these creators for choosing slop, as a fan, I can mourn the loss of an artist whose craft I once cherished. And the solution isn't to start piling a hate train on them, but just to stop supporting them and to let go of our need to control their work. I mean, if you click this video, you probably wanted me to dunk on these creators and to validate your rage, and you do get a bit of that in the beginning, but you probably didn't expect this video to end up more critical of us as an audience. So just like all the slop creators in this video, I ended up betraying your initial interest too. And in the process of creating this video, I betrayed myself, because when I first started making this video, I fully intended to just shit on these dudes. But creating is one thing and consuming is another, and to actually create videos, I was forced to be a creator rather than just a consumer, and in switching my perspectives, I realized what a piece of shit I am. Because it's not like they're Nigel Ong performing minstrelsy spreading racism on screen, they just made the decision to pivot from food education to food entertainment because that's what the algorithm showed them that most people wanted. So why would I hate on them unless I felt my viewership entitled me to dictating their lives? After getting this far, I realized I don't really have a problem with any of these creators, and by the end of this video, hopefully you can come to the same realization. Because I don't know their situation, so it'd be fucked of me to just shit on them for switching up when I could never fully grasp why they made their decision. Maybe they're burned out of what they originally did. That's fine. Maybe they need to prioritize money to support a family and a crew now. That's valid. As Wiseman says,
it's expensive to run a company. Very expensive, actually. If you are going to run a business and you're going to pay people, please understand that it's going to feel very volatile. And now all of a sudden the videos that you're producing, they have to perform.
or maybe they are just lazy and would rather make easy money. They were already successful before hiring the help of others, so why hire others to help you make the slop when you could just do what you originally did? The truth is, it's probably a combination of these things. But regardless, they're still making slop, and while that sucks for us, I can't blame them. These people are as much of a victim to the machine of YouTube and capitalism as any of us. The same social structures that have taught us since birth to keep chasing more and more profit regardless of the consequences. And the same system that encourages us to treat random people on the internet as entertainment and to hate them for making videos we don't personally enjoy. I mean, I'm sure none of the OG cooking creators before them warned them about any of this. They just want to improve the cooking genre and fell into the trap of believing what the algorithm thinks is success. Cause who expects someone who just wants to cook online to be aware of how they're turning into literal cyborgs and corporatizing their soul? That's insane! We've literally been holding these creators to a standard they were never aware of. But we're the ones holding these creators, and slop is still slop. So while to me, art is art and the things we put in public can have larger effects that we should be conscious of, if these creators just see their jobs as a job and making slop is the easiest way to do it, would any of us do it any differently? I'm sure some of us would, but if you were offered a chance to do an easier version of your job for a higher pay, how many of us wouldn't jump on the opportunity? I mean, if you worked at Mickey D's and were given the option to flip 80% less burgers for a 200% increase in pay, are you gonna take that job, or will you carefully consider how the reduction in patty flips could negatively affect the people in demand of cheeseburgers? Be real with me. This is just an extreme example, but the real procedure is even more insidious, because as described earlier, the process of selling out isn't just made with the flip of a switch or a single choice, but a slow process of shedding your humanity over thousands of incremental decisions. One day, you decide to do quicker edits to increase your viewer retention, and by slowly upping that, 2 years down the line, you eventually do a jump cut every half a second. Or maybe you're starting out on YouTube and you eventually get the chance to take your first sponsor. You're careful initially because you're unfamiliar with the process and want to be safe, but 80 sponsors down the line, you put a lot less thought into each sponsorship, and suddenly you're doing an ad for an alleged scam like BetterHelp. And a bit after that, you're a full-blown slot machine. So while lower effort content sucks, who cares if Babish is reviewing french fries or if Wiseman is producing slop aimed at appealing to kids? Our outrage towards their shift in content really isn't justified, because outrage is still attention. If you really want these creators to change, then disincentivize producing slop by not giving it your attention. If we teach others that we shouldn't dehumanize and reduce creators to just their content, then maybe slop would be less than in demand. Because we're acting as if these people have literally stabbed us in our backs when they can't even conceive of our existence. And if you look at their metrics, it seems they're doing better than ever. So what's the loss of a couple fans when they have millions more to replace us? As a YouTuber, the answer is probably nothing. And as a single audience member, I have nearly zero impact on their success. But as an artist, the thought of a fan who once resonated with my passion, leaving my content for selling out, hurts me on a deeply human level that I'm unsure I could explain. And that's why I made this video. So even if they no longer appeal to their OGs, and I may not personally enjoy the content they now release, I'm still not entitled to their labor, but they're not entitled to my support either. So rather than just hating, I've decided to just leave, and to make this video as a memorial to the lost humanity of their content while still humanizing them as people. So I hope they do well in their next endeavors, and I hope they can eventually go back to creating from a place of passion, but until then, as for me, this is where their story ends.